Welcome to Top Shelf Live, the Horrorween Edition. I am coming to you live from the Halloween horror headquarters here. I won't say where, just know that we're in the headquarters location. And we have two amazing guests tonight.
You got other guests?
Yeah, I do. I have two amazing guests tonight. And Jordan's just fabulous. I don't know where she picked you up, but I don't know who that guy is. I love the books in the back. You guys look amazing. Thank you so much for being here. For those of you who follow us on Instagram, this is new for us because normally we do our live show on Facebook. And it's almost a year to the day that James Wade was the first guest on our Top Shelf Live show. So we are so glad that you're back, James. I'm thrilled to see you.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for having me back. Yeah, I've been talking about our last Halloween show basically for the past year, so no pressure to repeat or anything. But no, this is wonderful, man. I love the connections you make through writing. How we didn't even know. I had no idea that you were such a horror nerd, and that immediately you hit it off with Jordan for y'all's mutual love of scary movies, and you guys begrudgingly have drugged me along, and so I'm fortunate to be here. I'll see what I can add.
I think you'll do just fine. I have no worries there. And of course, I had no idea that Jordan and I would just start texting each other randomly about, did you see this movie? Did you see that movie? So it's amazing that you're here and that that we're all together. I'm just going to pick my chair up because I'm a little short. So there you go. I do want to welcome all Merrick patrons, anybody else who is new to Top Shelf Live, near and far, welcome. We have a lot of ground to cover because horror is such a huge, massive undertaking. So anybody who watches horror, and if you watch Eli Roth, he has the History of Horror show that he does every year. He's up to season 3. So it will be impossible for the three of us, although we could keep going. This would be a marathon episode. It would be almost impossible for us to get to every single thing. So we're gonna try to narrow it down and give all of you guys our favorites. So I wanted to also mention that, yes, Jordan and I connected over our love of horror movies, Netflix, and all kinds of things. So I'm going to kick things off with 3 categories. We're going to try to do books, movies, and television. And we'll see how far we get, because I don't know how far we're going to get, but we're going to give it our best shot. And listen, if we have to come back and do a part 2, I'm always available.
I'm down.
Yeah, any good horror movie has a sequel, and then another sequel, and then another sequel. So
that's right.
We're fine. We'll keep this franchise going.
Yeah, okay. So I'm going to start off with books that you'd want to share tonight. And Jordan, if you would mind, just take us away with some of the books that you want to share with some of the viewers.
Yeah, absolutely. So my book isn't really a horror book. It's more like a psychological thriller. And it's actually the first book that I read. It's a young adult novel. And it came out in the 90s. And it's the first book that I read as a young adult that really got me into reading. It's called Running Out of Time by Margaret Peterson Haddix. And it's about this young girl that is living in a colonial village in the 1800s. And all of a sudden, all of her friends, these children in the village, start dying of diphtheria. And so there's kind of this mass hysteria that happens. And the little girl's mom comes to her and says, well, I need you to go get medicine. But the truth is that it's actually 1996 and we're living on a historical preservation. So truth bomb, you got to go out into the real world and help find this medicine. And so it's just a wild, wild ride. And what's super interesting is that it sounds super familiar to the Village plot. That if you've seen that movie by M. Night Shyamalan. And so he claims that he has this original idea and that's, he just shot the movie, but a lot of Running Out of Time fans were like, hey, this is like eerily similar to that book. So
plagiarism is the real horror, that's where the real scary comes in.
Yeah.
I was actually going to say that Optimum Wi-Fi is the real horror, but we'll talk about that at another time. I got to keep my hair colored with Optimum. That's all I'm going to say about that. But also, Jordan, you raised such a good point about the book that you chose, because horror doesn't necessarily mean like this guy back here or Freddy Krueger, or, I mean, horror can be a horrible person. It can be that thriller. I mean, everyone defines horror differently. And I know what works for me. And I'm always surprised when I watch a movie and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, this movie is just like terrific. I never expected to be this involved in it. So I love that you brought that up. I love that you chose YA, because there are so many YA crossovers. So I'm a big fan of that. And I appreciate that. That is now on my to be read column, because luckily I read both of James Wade's books. So we don't have to worry about that.
Oh my gosh.
So James, would you please share with some of the viewers some of your choices?
Yeah, absolutely. And so I brought Show and Tell to the class, and this is one of the ones I pitched last year, but The Night Runners by Joe Lanzell. So for those who don't know, Joe Lanzell is they call him the Popcorn King. He's kind of the master of pulp. He's from East Texas. He grew up about 20 minutes from where I grew up, and so naturally I was drawn to him as a young writer, as a young reader. And The Night Runners was, I want to say, maybe the first or second Lanzell novel that I picked up. And the Publisher's Weekly blurb on the front says, probably the best novel of its type between Psycho and The Silence of the Lambs. That's kind of high praise. And
I'll take that.
So obviously, I didn't need a lot of convincing to read it. It all takes place in East Texas on Highway 59, which again is where I grew up. And what's interesting about this book, and I feel like we're all kind of going around the horror heartbeat or whatever with all these other things it could be. This has some paranormal stuff in it. It has a lot of violence and like all of the classic horror stuff. But what I was drawn to the most is the main character and his wife are basically plagued by these road agents who are being kind of driven by this paranormal force, and they basically stalk them throughout the novel. But what's really scary to the main character is not just that these guys are after them, but that he feels inadequate in protecting his family. He feels inadequate in being able to stand up against these guys. And he doesn't even know that there's a paranormal aspect to it. And so I think that is, a huge play on horror is what our personal fears are. And, I think Lanzell wrote this in the 80s, and the 80s were like Rambo and Schwarzenegger and Stallone and all the action movies and big box office stuff. It was like a big push during the Reagan years, like machoism, right? And this guy is a professor in the novel, the main character. He's not a macho guy, and it just, all of the culture and all of the things that he's been told is like, oh man, I'm not good enough. I'm not, strong enough I'm not a man enough to protect my family. And so it's interesting the way Lanzell kind of weaves that theme into there. And then I won't spoil it, even though the book is 30 years old. That's the great thing about books is they never get old. I won't spoil it, but it's an interesting way that he kind of ties that in and then ends it in a way that, is not what you would expect.
I love that. I think that's Lansdale. We have shelves and shelves of him in the horror, in our horror space right now. We have lots of him there, which is amazing. And I do want to bring up your two books. So if I think about books, not specifically horror, although there are so many, I feel like horror books, the fiction is just on such an upswing, and it's amazing to see all the books that are out there. Nothing But Blackened Teeth by Cassandra Camm was just amazing. And that cover, that's the stuff of nightmares right there. But I also, you write, Mr. Wade, you write your own fair share of horrific type of characters, right? So you've got, one of your characters is Grimes in All Things Left Wild. Now, Grimes, he's this sort of charismatic, very persuasive guy, but he's crazy. And people don't realize what's going on with him until they get sort of suckered into all of his stuff. And then in River Sing Out, you give us, that's a Southern gothic noir kind of book. You give us The Thin Man. And I'm thinking, what the heck are you? So I don't want to call your books horror, but you give us two characters that really give me pause, and The Thin Man really just kind of knocked me out. I don't know what it's like when you're writing that, and does Jordan say, God, make him scary, or I don't know how that relationship works between the two of you, but those two characters are really, I almost look forward to the next book because I want to see how bad the next guy's going to be.
Right. Yeah, there is kind of like what we talked about. Horror can be such a broad genre and have so many things at play that whether it's Southern Gothic or, I went with Lanzell because he's more of a true horror writer, but any of McCarthy's stuff is that dark, either dark Western or dark Southern Gothic, to where, and that's where I grew up in East Texas, it was like that. All of our stories, even the ones that weren't ghost stories, had some kind of pretty seedy, pretty, grimy bend to it. And so, if I'm going to have an antagonist, I want to make them formidable, right? And there are a lot of different ways to do that. But with Grimes, that might be more what we're used to in this day and age, whether it's from politicians or
Correct.
CEOs or cult leaders or, whatever. They can kind of convince you that what they're doing is good or that they're helping when in reality, they have this, like you said, basically just this batshit ideal that they're pushing towards. But then on the flip side, The Thin Man is not crazy in the sense that he holds so steadfastly to a certain code or whatever you have it. The guy is basically just evil, right? I don't think Grimes is evil. Grimes is he's just crazy. He thinks he's doing a good thing, he's not tricking anybody, right? He firmly believes that he's making the world a better place. I don't think The Thin Man feels that way at all in River Sing Out. I think he just wants to, basically just go out there and kill people. And
he has a job to do, right?
Yeah, exactly.
That's his job. That's like, honey, I'm home. What'd you do today? Well, I knocked off however many people. But I loved him. And I remember when we talked in the podcast about him, and I said, did you look over your shoulder? Because he's such an insidious character. By the time you see The Thin Man, you're not going to see much after that. So, if he's in your line of sight, it's over. And he kind of has that Anton Chigurh feel. We talked about that. And I think and you also, both of those characters and both books have that Cormac McCarthy feel. So I'm ready for the next book whenever that comes along. No pressure.
When I
read
the first draft of River Sing Out and saw the Thin Man character come to life, I was like, yes, more of that, please. That's what we want to see.
It does. I started on short stories and writing short horror stories. That was the first thing I ever had published, was a short horror story called The Things That Watch. And I don't know. So it just feels natural to kind of incorporate that into the more literary stuff. And I've gotten that feedback a lot as well. One of my good buddies who read River Sing Out was like, hey man, I love, the whole book, but specifically the Thin Man chapters were just like holy crap moments. And so, I don't know. I'm going to have to, at some point, we're going to have to do a full-scale literary horror, in the vein of, I don't know, The Road, or maybe even something like The Night Runners or Psycho or something like that. I don't know. I'll have to talk it out.
She's interested.
I can't tap the hearts on my own screen because I'll probably disconnect this. But just know the hearts are flipping by very quickly.
Understood.
Very quickly. Well, I think when we first talked on the podcast about the first book you wrote, All Things Left Wild, and you mentioned to me that you entered the contest, and I forget how it went, but you said you had this short story, and I'm still waiting for that. I keep looking around. I don't see that.
So Jordan wants to send it to you, but A, she doesn't know where it is because I'm not sure I know where it is, and B, I was like, you're not supposed to show people your first, the first things, unless you're Larry McMurtry and you wrote The Horseman Passed By when you were 25 and it was amazing.
Wait, you don't think that's going to show up in the James Wade Memorial Library?
Oh, God.
East Texas? I'm sorry.
I'm not sure that's gonna make the cut.
It'll make the cut.
It's gonna get magically shredded.
No, come on. All right, we're going to move on. But anyway, for those folks, I don't know if you can see my scary tableau back here, but I've got River Sing Out and All Things Left Wild behind me because those books are never far from me. And I love that your friend talked about the Thin Man because he is all that. So I'm ready for that. Let's switch to some movies, which is, Jordan and I are like fast and furious when we're texting each other. So, James, if you don't mind, I'm going to start off with Jordan because I really want to hear what she has to say.
So this is, I picked a movie because I had to pick one, but of course I feel like I have 10 that are tied for, 10 plus. And so this hurts me that we only have so long to talk.
We got time. We
okay.
You can choose.
So,
Go ahead.
So I settled on The Ring, which, not the original Ringu, but the 2002 Ring. In fact, we just rewatched it the other night, and Carol Ann, when I first saw that movie, it shook me to my core, so much so that I'm now 33 years old, and I still have nightmares about the VHS tape scenes that are shown in the movie, and that girl's face when they open the closet door. And do you know what I'm talking about? That scene where so they open the door and she's just in there and her face is melting off her bones. And I'm like, I feel like it's one of the best half-second snapshots of cinematic horror ever. Yeah. That quick closet scene. I mean, I still think about it. It's scary.
They nailed that. And of course, and all that stuff you see on that videotape is terrifying.
It is. I feel like that is the stuff kind of when you wake up groggy and you have a nightmare, you can't really remember what was in it, but you know that there were these terrifying snippets. They did such a good job of picking, and you wouldn't necessarily think that a close-up of a horse's eye is going to be scary, but in that context, right, when you're flipping through those images and they have the music playing, you're just like, every time I watch that movie, I am just glued to it with my jaw open, like, this is terrifying.
And the fly that crawls across.
Oh, yes! And she's in the room and she's, playing with the tape and she's getting it to bend and you're just like, oh my God. Yeah. Yes.
It's terrible, but it's great. I mean, it's just, but yes, so that's the kind of movie that I think of. And I think another one that really makes me think of, when you think of the word dreadful, it fills you with dread.
Yes.
So the other, I don't know who mentioned it, but somebody, I think maybe James told me something about the movie, The Descent. That movie fills me with such dread. I almost don't watch it when it's on because I know the two endings and I don't know which ending I'm going to get. And I just don't want to invest. I don't want to invest because I know that I'm going to be so upset at the end. Forget what they see in the caves.
Yeah.
It's the other, it's that other stuff. So it is a dreadful feeling. So I am with you. Of course, Jordan, I am with you because we agree on just about everything.
I know. That movie is just.
Both of those movies do such a good job of making the fear so intimate. I think that's any filmmaker or storyteller, like that's one of the hardest things is you have to really bring what you're talking about to your audience and make them feel a part of it. And The Ring is so smart because we're watching the video that the characters are watching that causes them to die, right? So that makes it immediately, that makes it an intimate experience, right? Because we're seeing it right along with. So if they're going to die, we almost feel like, are we going to die?
Well,
like,
only if the phone rings, right?
So on that note, the first time I watched The Ring, I was watching it with my dad. Dad, if you're watching, I'm still bitter about this. As soon as the film ended, he called the house phone. And I jumped off the couch and and then we rewatched it the other night and James decided that it would be really great and hilarious to play the same prank and I fell for it. And I didn't realize my phone was on silent so I couldn't hear it ringing, but he goes, I think you just had a missed call. And I'm like, no, I didn't. And he goes, I'm pretty sure I just saw your screen light up and I checked it and it's of course said his name and I'm like,
it's not as, the cell phone age ruins it, right? Because you can just see that it doesn't say like Samara calling from the well. But,
Did you sleep out in the trailer, James? That's what I want to know.
no, that's actually where we watched it.
We
because
did watch it in the trailer. I like to watch scary movies in our camper in the backyard because it just adds that extra layer of like you're camping and like, oh.
Then you got to get out and walk in the dark back to the house. And I know you have deer on your property, so that alone ups the game.
Yes,
exactly.
Absolutely.
We have a fox.
I think you guys could charge for that.
What's
Go
that?
ahead.
Oh, we have
you
a
guys
fox.
should charge for that experience.
Oh, I think so. Oh, that's a great idea. Thank you.
I think so.
No way, man. We're free. If you build it, they will come. They'll just come, and you can watch horror movies in our camper and then feed the deer. We've got a fox that we've affectionately named Todd from Fox and the Hound that's been hanging out in the backyard, but he scared the hell out of us the first time he came up. And, you see these little glowing eyes in the dark. But no, it's, back to like the intimate experience of horror. Like, I feel like that is what more and more filmmakers are starting to realize, more and more authors are starting to realize. And to plug my friend Cadwell's book, No Gods, No Monsters, you could say it's a book about werewolves, about monsters, about all this stuff, and that's fine. But what he did was he made it so timely and so real and relevant by taking these social issues that we're facing and we're dealing with. And again, it makes it intimate to us, and I think every good book, every good horror film really does that. Like you were talking about, The Descent, it's not so much the fear of the crawlers or, whatever's in the cave. It's the grief and the loss, and it's the whole film is one big metaphor, right, about her descending into this despair after losing her family. And so, anytime a filmmaker can do that and can take it a level deeper and more than just jump scares. Not that there's anything wrong with a good old fashioned,
Oh, and there's plenty in there, yeah.
Right, exactly. But anytime you take it a step or two further, that just makes it good cinema and good storytelling, more importantly.
I feel like you think about it for longer after you're done watching
Yes.
it. Once it gets that deeper level, you keep thinking about it.
And the levels are in us, and the further they go in us, the more it stays.
The longer we think about it.
Right, and especially in The Descent, I feel like I'm the main character.
Yes.
So
exactly.
if I'm the main character and I'm thinking, do this or do that, and I've watched it so many, and I'm still like, do this, don't do that, and I, so that is the feeling. It is a dread-filled movie for me. So that's one of those and The Ring is too, and The Grudge, I feel the same way about.
Yes, The Grudge is, that's bad. That's bad.
And my daughter will, she'll mess with me and do that voice, that gargle, that she does it really well. And I'm just like, I'm like, you got to stop because you're not getting dinner. No. All right, so James, what about you? Tell us what's your movie?
Yeah, we're huge Rob Zombie buffs.
Yes.
And that's like, I used to think that was just a given, that everybody that liked horror movies was a Rob Zombie head, but I've gotten some pushback on that, that like, oh, you can't mess with Halloween or whatever, but I felt like, and again, this goes back to...
Oh, I think he did a great job.
I think it goes back to the storytelling, and so... I loved both Halloween and Halloween 2 that he redid both of those, but I'm going to pick Halloween 1 just because it gives us something that I feel like, as good as several of the original franchise movies were, it never gave us the backstory in the depth that he goes into about what made Michael Myers the way he was. And there's a scene, and it's early on in the film, it's a breakfast scene where Michael Myers is a young kid, and his mom, who is a stripper, is, trying to cook breakfast for his stepdad, who's basically just a degenerate. And, everyone's fighting and screaming. And at that point, it's like, it's not a horror movie. It's like this terrible family drama. And the acting in that scene is eerily good. And so immediately, again, you're invited into that world in a way that is so personal. And it humanizes Michael Myers in a weird way.
Yes.
And then it also makes it make sense to when he basically checks out of humanity and decides, I'm going to be a freaking ghoul, and so it's that scene alone just really blew my mind and set up the whole saga for me a lot better in a way that the other films didn't. And then, of course, there's little decisions like the violence in which the camera angles and the sound effects. Like when Rob Zombie's Michael Myers stabs you, I mean, as a viewer, I like felt it. It's like it's almost like he was filming a boxing match or something, you know, in a very realistic manner. And so it's kind of unsettling, you know, that level of violence. But again, it makes it so much more real. And you know, when I grew up in East Texas, heavily religious part of the country, and all the films that scared me, that truly scared me, were like the supernatural, the, you know, the devil and that kind of stuff.
The Exorcist.
The Exorcist.
He will not watch The Exorcist. I tried to get him to rewatch it. He's like, no.
No, she lies like a broken watch.
Will you watch it?
There.
Hey, we shook on it. We're watching that tonight.
But you know, but those I was horrified of those films. Like Phantasm, I watched it way too young of an age.
I know it's backwards, but
no, that I will not watch.
I love that movie.
Well, and it's so good, but again, when it, like, for me as a kid, you can't mess with the supernatural stuff. But movies like Scream and like slasher flicks, you know, even Halloween, it didn't really bother me that much because I always thought I had a better chance against like a human foe than I did against a supernatural foe. And so again, that's why I'm so blown away by what Rob Zombie did, is because he scared the hell out of me with a human, you know, killer, a human antagonist. I was like, yeah, you know what? I think I would have just as good a shot with a you know, terrible spirit as I would with this version of Michael Myers. And so that's kind of...
Right, because when Michael Myers snaps in his movies, and Rob Zombie, you know it's happening. You can feel that level of malevolence.
It's rage. Yeah.
It is. That's exactly right. You just made me think of, there's a scene in Full Metal Jacket where I can't think of the, Vincent D'Onofrio, I think.
Yes.
He is pushed so hard and so far. And when he snaps, I mean, it is just tragic.
Yeah.
What happens there. But I'm hearing you say exactly the same thing, and I didn't think about it in terms of Rob Zombie's Halloween, but you're exactly right, that once that snap happens, it's, you know, you want to know what the backstory is. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And you know, you mentioned like old horror and devil, and so I'm going back to an old classic, an OG as they call it, from 1957. Now, despite outward appearances, I was not at the premiere for that movie. I'm just gonna say it. But there is a movie called Curse of the Demon. I know it's backwards, but at least you could see the demon. Now, what I love about this movie is they didn't have really a whole lot of special effects in 1957. And what they do in this movie with the special effects, and I was a wee one when I watched it the first time, it was so terrifying. And of course, coming from a, you know, Catholic family, when you see the devil, you believe that it's him.
Absolutely.
So, it also, though, if you like It Follows, that movie, It Follows, which we all loved, I think that was such a great movie. It does something similar to It Follows. So I want to say that this sort of started, and then, you know, it follows that same kind of trajectory, and it really just, you can actually, I think this whole month it's been on Turner Classic Movies, and sometimes we get something here called Me TV, and there's a guy named Sven Gulli, and he shows all of these old school horror movies, like The Crawling Eye. I mean, 1958, this is cosmic horror, so I also live in this space, you know, because, you know, that's just, I don't know what my husband thinks when I...
You're awesome, that's what he thinks.
I think he'll say it from the other room. I don't think he'll say it while the TV's on. And then we have to talk about Poltergeist.
Yes.
Because when I saw 1982, I mean... I'm sitting there for 114 minutes, and everybody in that darn movie is saying, Carol Ann, and they're either yelling at me, or they're laughing, or they're screaming at me. People will stop me if I say, oh, hi, I'm Carol Ann. Oh, don't walk into the light. I'm like, did you ever hear that one? Yes. I hear it all the time. Sometimes I'm like, no, I never have. But those movies just, they track. And again, what you said, James, about the working man's experience or the common experience, social issues, right? This is a suburban family. They're looking for the American dream. They buy this beautiful house, right? They've made it. They've achieved this dream. And then, of course, we go through the whole movie and then we find out where the house is actually built. So it's that darker side of the American dream, which is a metaphor for everything, you know. So I agree with you on that. It's not until you mentioned it that I thought, oh my gosh, this is, you know, that we're actually talking about the same thing. Was there any other movie that you guys wanted to mention?
I mean,
Look,
there's so many.
Yeah,
but Nightmare on Elm Street,
Oh,
the
yeah.
original,
Absolutely.
I think that was the first scary movie that I saw. And I was of the age where my parents weren't even really letting me watch scary things. But this was over at a friend's house. And her dad was like, we're just going to watch this movie. And I was like, okay. Not mentioning that I wasn't allowed to. And we watched it. And that was one of those movies where I was hiding behind the blanket thinking that the blanket was going to save me. You know what I mean? Or if there's any exposed skin and, you know, the AC turns on and blows on it, then you're going to die. I mean, that's how it felt with this blanket. I was just like wrapped up in it, rocking, like, oh my God. So yeah, I think that was my first introduction into scary movies.
Also, let's face it, when that movie came out, I know the youngins today, you know, it's not something, when we saw that, when that movie first came out, nobody had seen anything like that before.
Right.
So it was all fresh and new. It's like watching Hellraiser. You know, when you see that for the first time, and again, you got that weird cosmic Clive Barkery thing happening, and it just, your head just like explodes when you realize that there's this other dimension, and they sell it and they make it real. And I'll never go into an attic again. I'm not going to do that.
I'm terrified of addicts, actually.
And I think it's very telling that we're all referencing movies we saw that made an impression on us when we were young. You know, I mean, I think that right there just kind of speaks to how influential the genre can be, because it is things that you're not exposed to, right, until you see it on screen, especially when you're a young person watching horror movies. And, you know, everybody has that story. I feel like that I went to a friend's house, you know, to watch that.
Right.
I was the opposite. So my old man was like, I'm 5 years old, and he's like, here, check out Phantasm. This tall guy is about to come out of the mirror, you know, and like, and so I have so many. Yeah, yes, thank you. I will dream of nothing else for weeks. You know, the little balls that, you know, float around and then stick in your head. Anyway. But I mean, I can still remember snippets of movies that as a kid, they're terrifying, but then you watch them when you're older, maybe not so much. Congo, I was convinced when I was a kid that there were gorillas in my room that were really, you know, pissed off at me, because I saw it at such a young age. Wes Craven's The People Under the Stairs. Oh gosh, the first time I got a shot of the people, you know, I was just, it freaked me out. And so all of those things that you see when you're younger that you've never been exposed to before. And I think it's one of the reasons that when we see films, to your point, Carol Ann, when something comes out that either you haven't seen before or that's presented in a new way, those tend to be the movies that kind of rise above the, you know, with so many movies coming out all the time,
right.
You know, that kind of rise above. And so, you know, recently there's been, Ari Aster has done Hereditary and Midsommar. You know, those are things that not necessarily that we've never seen, but that were presented in a way that we're not used to. Jordan Peele with Get Out, you know, that was, again, that's a new concept. And so all of these films that kind of rise above the middling horror genre movies are films that are doing something a little new, a new twist. You know, from when we were kids, I'm guessing like the Blair Witch Project was kind of that new thing. It started the found footage genre that went completely off the rails.
That is scary as heck. Like Cloverfield, when they do Cloverfield, like my head exploded.
Yeah, right. And all the paranormal activities, that was like our second or third date, was to see one of the paranormal activities.
I had to see it as a keeper. I was like, will you go see this movie with me? Because if the answer is no, then I'm going to have to go home.
So
that is so romantic.
She lied a little bit about liking sports, and so she would just watch sports with me for the first few months, even though she didn't like it. And I lied a little bit about really being into horror films, so I would just watch horror films with her for the first few months. And then one night we both were just like, you know what? I don't like sports and I don't like horror movies. They're like, deal.
Honeymoon's over.
Yeah. So, but yeah, all of that. And then I would be remiss if I didn't mention Friday the 13th, not just the franchise, but the remake, because I didn't realize this until after we've been dating for a while, but she had Jordan used to be a film and television actress, and she was, there was a scene in Friday the 13th where she was just kind of helping out with, as part of the crew on that shoot.
I was a stand-in on that movie for a couple of the actresses.
And who was it Willa Ford?
Willa Ford, yeah.
Willa Ford had a scene where she had to, where she was like in the lake or something.
They had her situated kind of like in these reeds, and of course as a stand-in, you match the skin tone and kind of the size and shape of the actress, and so they set the shot up on you, and then at the last second they call in the A team, and so this is like 4 o'clock in the morning in the Texas Hill Country, and they're like, you know, right? It's so cold. Yeah. And you know, you have to wear a certain kind of blank clothing, and so I was not dressed for the weather. They had me get in the water, and they were like, the director was like, he was German, and so he kind of had this accent. He was like, okay, now lay further back. I can't do a German accent, but anyways, so I end up like completely arched over this like stump that we just found in the water. It wasn't like a prop or anything. And they were like, he kept yelling, make her hair go farther. And so they were like, putting my hair into the reeds. And a crew member was like, I saw snakes. And so he literally said, the crew member was like, I'm getting her out. This is unsafe. So he literally came in and picked me up out of the water and carried me up onto the bank and put me in front of the little heater.
So
crazy.
She had her own Friday the 13th moment. You know,
that's a big moment. That's not just a little, that's a big moment. Oh my gosh.
Yes, that was crazy.
So that was your first exposure as being a screen queen.
Right? Yes, that's right.
No, that's actually not true. The first movie the first set she was ever on was the movie Teeth. I don't know if you remember that movie.
You're kidding.
Yeah, I was
an extra. I didn't have lines or anything.
I love how you downplay it. She was an extra in a couple of the opening scenes of Teeth. And that movie, again, talk about something we've never seen before.
Yes.
You know, that movie kind of was like, I mean, I've seen people call it a horror movie. I've seen people call it a dark comedy. You know, however you want to go with it. It was damn sure something that was memorable and impactful. I remember, you know, when I saw it for the first time, I was like, all right, so there's something to think about. But yeah, so she's been all over the horror landscape, you know.
I'm like in awe right now. This is just amazing. This is talk about found footage. I feel like we just found information. This is like the best I could have expected.
I'm better than her at talking about her own stuff because she wants to play it down. But when we met, she was working on a film called Beneath the Darkness with Dennis Quaid, and I got to go on set, and it was a horror movie, so it was all Dennis Quaid was a psycho killer, and all those scenes were at night, and so they were doing these night shoots.
Oh my god.
And I wandered onto set like the lost country guy from East Texas that I was. And I just thought it was I was like, I'm on the set of a horror film right now. This is so cool.
With the hat or without the hat?
With the hat.
Okay.
I think I had the hat. And they were like, you know, they had to turn around and like the first or second AD had quiet. You know, but anyway, yeah, it was just, I feel like that brought filmmaking and the, just the craft of these horror films, like made it more personal to me when I could watch her do it. And again, we can be watching a movie and she can explain the way that they set up a certain scare shot or something like that. And
you would think that my knowledge of the way that movies are made would kill the scare for me, because when I watch movies, I do think like, oh, that's interesting, they chose to do that or whatever, just from like a technical standpoint. But it doesn't kill it at all for me. In fact, it makes it feel even more intimate, kind of like what we were talking about earlier, where it feels personal, and so you're drawn to the story even more. But yeah, so it's I don't know, it didn't ruin my my horror experience at all. I just love it.
It didn't ruin mine either. I'm still terrified.
Yeah.
And I want to say it was last night or the night before, Paranormal Activity 2 was on, and I thought, you know, I don't know if it was going to scare me that much. I mean, I kind of get the idea. Well, I would not get off that sofa until my husband walked into the room. And because the way they build the tension, and they're also using a soundtrack. So there's like a rumbling sound when you know that the paranormal activity is about to begin.
Yes.
Each time I was like, oh, for heaven's sake, another one. I mean, and then Andy comes in, my husband, he's like, wait, why are you watching? Because I like it.
Yes. See,
it scares me.
That's what I don't understand about you
I
too.
love that feeling of being
It's
scared. I chase that feeling.
It's a different emotion. Like you can have emotions during the day that you're frustrated or you're really happy or you're really joyful. But that moment when I'm sitting on my sofa and I'm actually trying to wind down. And then I was just finished drinking like my night tea or whatever. And then I was like, oh God, I gotta pee. I'm not getting off the sofa. And then I'm texting Andy, can you turn the lights on in the hallway because I gotta go that way? And
oh my gosh, you guys are cut from the exact same.
We are. I have had him come with me to the bathroom before. Like, I can't do this on my own. I need you to come with me. I'm terrified right now.
There was a movie. My dad is very much like you guys, and early on when Jordan and I were first I first moved in together, I think. My dad called and said, I just saw the scariest movie I've seen since The Exorcist. Oh. And so, of course, Jordan's like, well, what is it? Because we have to go watch it. And it was, I want to say it was The Fourth Kind. This would have been in like 2010,
That's
maybe.
That's a tough one.
It's
a movie.
And so she made me watch it. And then as soon as it was over, of course, I'm upset and terrified. And she's laughing at me. But then it's that all-important moment, it's almost like the climax of the horror movie, but like in our living room, which is when she then has to go pee. And that is the moment that we find out if she's as tough as she thinks she is or as was pretending to be. And spoiler alert, she never is. No. Lights are all coming on. I've got to go like stand outside the door. And that hasn't changed in 11 years because now our daughter, she'll be putting Juniper to bed, and she'll be like, leave the door open a little bit so that I can see the light coming in.
I'm like this much scared of the dark.
Right. But she does it to herself.
But it's because I have this catalog of scary
things in your head.
Forever.
Yeah.
And you don't know. It's a great point, Jordan, because you don't know which one you're going to think of when you hit the dark hallway.
Thank you.
I never know which one. Is it going to be the Babadook? Or is it going to be the two girls from The Shining?
I have to literally, when we are laying our daughter down to sleep at night and he leaves, the lights are all off, I have to make sure that the closet door is shut because the first image that comes to mind if that closet door is open is the ring. And her in the closet with the face and the melting, and I'm trying to be all motherly, but I'm shaking and sweating, and I'm just like, go to sleep.
And does this not? I mean, as kind of the outsider to this cult that you guys have formed here, does this not seriously speak though to the power of the genre, to where I can't think of anything else, even my favorite movies, even my favorite books, that stick with me as cling to me as fiercely as the horror genre. I've got a buddy of mine, actually the same buddy that enjoyed The Thin Man so much, and I don't know if he's watching right now, but we'll call him out. We'll comment and tag him later because he's Mr. Hotshot Cool Guy now. In fact, his handle, for those who want to go look him up, is @CoolHandleLuke, and we're gonna tag him. Because I saw The Ring with Cool Handle Luke back when we were in high school, and if he's to be believed, which he is a trustworthy guy, he has not seen a horror movie since The Ring because he to this day has nightmares about The Ring. And so the other night, this one, and we call ourselves the Three Amigos, like it's nothing but love between he and Jordan, but Jordan was very much ready to send him she was gonna record the Ring, the tape in The Ring, and then send him the recording of the tape, and
force him to watch it.
I'd force him to watch it because she is cold-blooded. That's what horror movies do. That's what it does to your brain. Anyway, but again, it speaks to the power of the genre that these things can stay with us for so long. Stuff that people watch when they're kids, and you can vividly remember. I can't remember a movie that I watched last week, but I can absolutely remember the demon flash in The Exorcist, you know, when they put it on the tape, you know, where it's just that second, you know, it's not even, it's incredible, the power that this has, you know.
Absolutely.
And you mentioned, James, that your parents or your dad was a really big horror person. So my parents were. And I can remember one of the first movies my mother took my sister and I to see. I don't know how old we were, but it was a movie called Let's Scare Jessica to Death. And it's from the 70s, and it's kind of a trippy movie. And I don't want to spoil anything, because if you do see it, it's worth the watch. It scared the heck out of me. So we've grown up with this, and I feel like, you know, but being surprised by horror is the best thing that can happen to us. And we're running out of time, but I do have a question for you. What will Juniper be wearing for Halloween? What's her costume?
Daddy bought her costume this year, and she's going as a deer.
So she is obsessed with the deer that are in our backyard.
Yes.
For those that heard Carol Ann mention that earlier, it wasn't hyperbolic. We have a herd of about 12 deer that live in our backyard. We feed them every morning and every evening. And our daughter, who is a year and a half, is obsessed with them. She waves at them, hello and goodbye.
She barks at them because I think she thinks they're dogs.
Occasionally she'll bark at them.
Oh my gosh.
But she's obsessed with the deer, and when they're not there, she kind of holds her arm up and like this. So anyway, we got her the cutest little fawn costume.
She's so cute.
It's gonna be more on the adorable side of Halloween, because in years to come she's not gonna have a choice but to go as terrifying things. So we want to get like the cute stuff and the pictures out of the way.
Get it out of the way first.
Just get it out of the way when she doesn't remember it. But
my daughter went as SpongeBob.
This is going to be her first trick-or-treating. You know, last year with COVID, she didn't get to. And
right.
So we're really excited about that. And we're thinking about, we live in like kind of a neighborhood, but everybody has some nice hill country space between them. And so instead of like walking up and down the street, we're going to probably take our golf cart. And so we're going to, so Mom and I are going to deck out the golf cart to look very scary. And so we're still going to work in the horror theme, you know. Maybe put some, like, I don't know, blood marks all over it and some spider webs and stuff. So we'll see. And
just let everybody know before we go where they can find you on Instagram so they can follow along with, if you do post some of these pictures.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So I'm at James Wade Ryder, super easy.
And I'm at Pretty Handy Mommy.
You are. I have to say, you do all kinds of things. I'm like, you're painting things and building things, and I'm just like sitting on the sofa watching Paranormal Activity.
Oh, stop.
Yeah, same. I'm sitting on the sofa watching sports or in the office reading or writing, and meanwhile she's building.
I walk by with like a handsaw, and he's like, he just shakes his head, and he's like, she's at it again. I'm like, don't worry about it, honey.
I can see our garage from my office, and I'll just see her going back and forth with power tools, and then she'll be like, I built us this desk, or I built us this, you know, entry. She literally built out of old milk crates. She built a place like way too nice for no reason, a super fancy kind of mod shelf for like Amazon deliveries and like UPS stuff. So I'm just like, they can just leave it at the door. And she's like, no, this is nice. It's a shelf.
Jordan, so, that's your cottage industry. And then you can start figuring out how to shoot your next horror movie. Like
yes,
come up with a script for it. And also, I feel like, James, if Pretty Handy Mom is walking around with a saw and then she goes into the garage, if there's not a short story there, I don't really. You got enough.
We'll do a found footage thing of that. But no, before we go, on Netflix, Mercy Black by my friend Owen Edgerton, who's a wonderful horror director. Mercy Black and Bloodfest by Owen Edgerton.
Okay.
Y'all write that down. Go look it up. They're so much fun. Owen knows how to scare the hell out of you and also make you laugh.
It's a wild ride.
All right, I'm in. All right, Owen. I'm watching. I'll be watching. I don't know if I could do it tonight because, you know, Mister's going to have the sports on, but we will in the future. I can't thank you guys enough. James, I know you're probably working on something, many things. So when do you think we'll see a little something?
So we don't have a release date yet, but we're fairly confident we're confident it's going to be next year fairly confident probably around this time, which is going to be great because it's not a full-fledged horror, but tentatively titled Beasts of the Earth, and it is very spooky. I mean, like, it's definitely, it gets down, again, like we talked about earlier, it gets down in the mud with some really dark characters.
It's chilling. It's a very
chilling is a good word.
Yeah.
And so, you know, this is the closest thing I've written to a true like murder mystery. And so we're gonna find out how it goes, but we're in the editing process right now and should have cover reveal and ARCs and all that stuff coming sometime next year.
And look, the guy behind me is raising his hand. He's all in.
I'll take one.
Yeah, he's like, please just one. And we love Blackstone. They are amazing. I'm interviewing Cadwell on Monday for No Gods, No Monsters. And I had him on for the lesson. So the fact that he came out with this new book, that's the trilogy, I don't know what's going on there. Beautiful alchemy at Blackstone. So shout out to them. Guys, it's always a pleasure. I can't believe you were here for the first Instagram Live that we ever did. I don't know how there were no technical problems. We have a fire station across the street and the alarm went off, but I don't know if anybody heard it. So I'm not that worried about it.
I thought it was special effects.
I was hoping somebody would think that.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for having us, Carol.
Thank you, Carol Ann.
You guys are awesome. And we'll look forward to seeing you guys soon. Thanks again so much for doing it.
Happy Halloween, guys.
Yeah, happy Halloween.
7 days.
Oh.
Yay.